Hello, my name is Professor John Harrison. I'm an experimental psychologist, and today I'd like to talk to you about cognition, behavior, plasticity, and the possibility that we might be able to train cognition. Let me start with neuroplasticity. So we've known for a very long time that the human brain is plastic. What do I mean by that? Well, plastic in the sense that in order to accommodate new information, there must be physical changes that go on in your brain. So if I tell you something new, if I tell you the capital of Outer Mongolia is Ulaanbaatar, and you remember that tomorrow, there have been changes in your brain to accommodate that new information. After puberty, there seems to be less plasticity, but you can still learn new information. So it's quite clear that there are elements of plasticity even within the adult brain. The element that's not really been looked at and exploited as much as we might is the idea that you can train your brain. Maybe there are things that we can do to enhance the connections between different locations, to enhance your abilities in various cognitive domains. I'm going to talk to you about cognition. Cognition is this idea of thinking, and we can divide thinking into some helpfully manageable lumps. A key one would be episodic memory. This is your memory for an event. So if you visited the cinema last weekend, you might have a memory for the film, who you went with, where the cinema was, maybe even some of the things you had to eat and drink. Now that's an episode in your life, episodic memory. And that contrasts with what we call semantic memory. Semantic memory is your knowledge for facts. So if I ask you the capital of France and you tell me that it's Paris, you probably can't tell me the first occasion where you learnt that information. So it's not an episode for you, it's part of your semantic memory, things that you know about the world. Another element of cognition is what we call working memory. But it's not really a form of memory. Memory implies that there's something you're trying to remember from past events. Working memory is really the term that we use to describe the space in your cognition where you solve problems. Let's think of an example of that. So if I ask you to take 7 away from 100 and keep going, what do you have to do to achieve that? Well, you have to retrieve from your semantic memory the idea of 100, the concept of 100, and your concept of 7, and your concept of subtraction. And then you can use that information in your working memory to subtract 7 from 100 and progressively tell me the product from each subtraction. So working memory is that element of your cognition where you solve problems. Another facet of cognition is really an umbrella term that we'll call executive function. Now this is a number of different elements to your cognition, but the things that we usually think about in this context of executive function would be your ability to plan ahead, to develop a strategy. To think outside the box, you really have to have elements of your executive function intact and working. There are some other elements to executive function. So one of the things that we can do is inhibit something that we'd really like to do. Imagine you're in traffic and you get cut up by another driver. You might want to shake your fist, you might even want to curse at them, but having the capacity to inhibit that behavior is an element of executive function. So executive function, it's an umbrella term, really means lots of different areas of cognition, but in common would be planning, organization, strategy, and the ability to inhibit a very potent response that you might like to make. And we also have the idea of psychomotor speed, how quickly you can respond to an event in your environment. So we would test this in a laboratory by showing you an image on a screen, and then you'd press a button to show that you detected that and made a response as quickly as possible. So psychomotor speed, another facet of cognition that we think is very, very important. It could be seen as a behavior, we're just measuring how quickly you do things, but I think we have an idea that your cognition is really two things: how accurate you are, how efficiently you deal with information, but also how quickly you can get to an answer. So those two facets, accuracy and speed, are the two things that psychologists are most interested in. And almost every test, every cognition test we have, focuses on either measuring accuracy or speed. Psychologists very rarely measure other things in the context of cognition. Another facet of cognition is attention. So attention is your ability to focus on a specific area or on a specific element of a problem. Or if you're in a busy room, for example. Maybe you're at a party and you hear your name. That can capture your attention. So we have this experience of attention being captured as well as being devoted to certain elements of your cognitive problem solving. So there are various aspects to human cognition that we know on the basis of very good evidence can benefit from training. And the opportunity with cognitive training going forward is to exploit that technology to try to help people improve their cognition.